We're always told that the answers to AI ethics, well, they lie somewhere in the future. But what if the best blueprint we have is actually 1,400 years old? Today we're diving into this pretty wild idea that the principles of a 7th century leader could help us solve our most complex modern problem. This whole concept is inspired by the work of Zahir Ahmed Mir, who makes this incredible connection between ancient wisdom and our digital age. So yeah, let's get right into it.
I know, it sounds like a crazy question, right? But what if the fundamental rules for fair and just leadership are, well, timeless? We're about to see how the governance model of Abu Bakr, the very first Caliph of the early Islamic community, offers this powerful and, frankly, surprisingly relevant framework for building ethical AI.
So where do we even begin? Well, we start with the most important concept of all, public trust. For Abu Bakr, this wasn't just some vague, nice idea. No, it was a real, physical institution, a public treasury they called the Beit al-Mal.
Now look closely at this definition. The Beit al-Mal wasn't the leader's personal piggy bank. It was considered a sacred trust. And that one little shift in perspective, it changes everything. It means the leader wasn't an owner of the public's money, they were simply its guardian. That distinction right there, that's the entire foundation for this whole ethical model.
This quote just nails that mindset perfectly. It draws such a clear ethical line in the sand. The community's resources, they belong to the community, period. A leader's job isn't to control those things for their own benefit, but to protect them. Power isn't a privilege. It's this incredibly profound responsibility.
Okay, so how does this ancient idea connect to our world today? It's actually really simple. Back in the 7th century, the most valuable shared asset was public wealth, the money in the treasury. Today, you could argue it's our public data. So if we apply this same principle, it means that tech companies and governments don't actually own our data. They are just its guardians.
And just think for a second about what happens when you truly adopt this guardian mindset. All of a sudden, the biggest ethical nightmares in AI start to look totally different. Data misuse isn't just a technical oopsie, it's a massive breach of trust. Unauthorized surveillance isn't just a questionable policy, it's a complete failure of duty. That one word, guardian, it reframes the entire debate.
So, pillar number 1 is guardianship. Got it. But, you can't really be a trusted guardian if you're doing everything behind closed doors. And that brings us to the second principle, governance in the open. And we're not talking about carefully crafted corporate press releases here. This was a philosophy of radical transparency. Just pause on that for a second. This is a world leader, in his very first speech, inviting the public to call him out and correct him. It's like a built-in feedback loop, an active request for accountability. I mean, you could argue this is one of the world's first open-source models for good governance. It's incredible. And here it is, the direct link to today's tech. That ancient principle, the idea of being answerable to the people you serve, is exactly what we're now demanding from our AI systems. We have a fancy name for it, explainable AI, or XAI. The core idea is simple. A black box algorithm, one that can't explain how it made a decision, is just not acceptable anymore. And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because transparency can't just be some buzzword that companies throw around. It has to mean providing real, clear answers to some really tough questions, especially from the very people whose lives are being impacted by these AI systems every single day. I mean, these are the questions an ethical AI has to be able to answer. Why was my loan application denied? What specific data did you use to decide that? Who is supervising this algorithm to make sure it's fair? And, maybe most importantly, if the AI got it wrong, how can I challenge it? Just like that 7th century leader invited correction, our 21st century systems absolutely must have a built-in "correct me" button. This brings us right to our third and final pillar, accountability. Because look, it's one thing to explain your actions. It's another thing entirely to actually face consequences for them. This is all about making sure that justice applies to everyone, especially the people who build and control these incredibly powerful systems. This is just such a powerful statement on justice. It completely flips the normal power dynamic on its head. What he's saying is, the job of a leader isn't to serve the powerful, but to empower the vulnerable. It establishes that nobody is above the law, and that a ruler's main job is to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves.
So what does this kind of real accountability prevent in the age of AI? Well, it stops algorithmic bias from becoming permanent, unchangeable injustice. It means that tech companies can't just deploy harmful systems and then walk away with no consequences. It establishes a critical principle for our time. Digital harm is real harm, and someone has to be held responsible for it. Okay, so let's put this all together now. What we've been talking about isn't just a collection of interesting historical facts. It's a coherent and, I think, actionable blueprint for governing AI, built on 3 timeless principles from the 7th century.
And here's that blueprint boiled down. Step 1, establish public trust, where our data is treated like the sacred public good it is. Step 2, demand radical transparency, where AI systems have to be fully explainable. And step 3, enforce full accountability, making sure the creators of these systems are answerable for any harm they cause. Guardianship, explainability, and justice.
And that really leaves us with the final question. The blueprint for ethical AI. Maybe it's not something we need to invent from scratch. Maybe it's something we just need to rediscover. The principles are ancient, they're clear, and they're proven. The only real question left is, in our modern, fast-moving, profit-driven world, do we actually have the will to build with it?
We're going to break this down. First, we'll connect this ancient wisdom to our modern AI problem. Then we'll get into 3 huge ideas: purity over profit, sharing digital power, and why trust is so important. After that, we'll pull it all together into a real blueprint for today's tech world. And finally, we'll look at what a system of governance built on integrity could actually look like.
All right, let's jump right in. We're talking about taking these core principles of leadership, of justice, from way back then and seeing if they can actually apply to the algorithms that are, running our lives now. It's a heck of a leap, but let's see where it takes us. Okay, first up is a big one, and it goes right to the heart of how so much of the tech world works today. It's the idea of purity over profit. This is all about financial integrity, and it asks a simple question: what is this technology really for?
So where does this idea even come from? Well, it goes back to Abu Bakr's absolute dedication to public service. For him, being a leader wasn't a chance to get rich. It was a massive responsibility, a sacred trust. Think about it. He refused to take even the smallest perks from public funds. And at the end of his life, he returned everything he had been paid. That's a powerful statement.
So, what does that have to do with AI? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. It sets a really clear rule. AI shouldn't be built just for greed or to exploit people. Its fundamental purpose has to be about uplifting society, about making things better for everyone.
And here you can see the 2 ideas just clash head-on. On one hand, you've got this principle that the public good comes first, always. And on the other hand, you have the reality of today's AI. Algorithms literally designed to hook you, to trick you, all for profit. You just can't have both.
So, if you actually follow this code of conduct, a lot of what we see today would be, off limits. Manipulating people into buying stuff they don't need? Gone. Stealing our attention just to sell more ads? Nope. Secretly harvesting our data? Absolutely not. And designing those algorithms to be as addictive as possible? All of that, it just wouldn't fly.
All right, that leads us right into our second big principle. See, if the first idea was about why we build AI, this next one is all about who gets to benefit from it. It's about sharing digital power.
And again, this goes back to the Caliph's focus on social justice. He didn't just let wealth pile up with the rich, he set up systems to make sure that money actually got to the people who needed it most: the poor, the widowed, the orphans. It was about making sure there was a real safety net, that everyone had a fair shot.
So how in the world do we apply that to today's digital world? This is where the idea of the Beit Umal comes in. It basically means house of wealth. The idea is to think of all the amazing things AI can do, the data, the tools, the opportunities, as a kind of public treasury, something that belongs to all of us and should be shared fairly, not just hoarded by a handful of tech billionaires.
Okay, but what does that actually mean? What would that look like? Well, it would mean making sure everyone can get their hands on these AI tools, not just the big players. It means stopping digital monopolies before they even start. It means protecting small businesses from getting crushed. And this is a big one. It means using AI to create opportunities for people who need them most, instead of making the rich-richer divide even wider.
And that brings us to the third pillar, and you could argue it's the most important one of all: trust. Because really, without trust, the other 2 principles just fall apart. It's the currency that makes everything else work, whether you're talking about an ancient society or our digital world today.
And this kind of trust, it didn't just happen by accident. It was built, piece by piece, on some really clear virtues: honesty, living simply, a deep commitment to justice, being transparent in his dealings, and having true humility. These weren't just buzzwords, they were how he led.
And look, the connection to our world today is it's urgent. If we want AI to be a positive force in our lives, if we want any kind of rules to actually work,
People have to trust the system. It's the absolute foundation, non-negotiable. If people don't trust it, the whole thing comes crashing down.
So, how does an AI system earn our trust? Well, it's not about marketing or promises. It's about actions. It's when the systems are genuinely fair, when we can actually understand why they make the decisions they do. No more black box mystery. It's when we know our data is safe, when we feel respected as human beings, not just data points, and when the companies and governments behind it all are held accountable for what their AI does.
When you boil it all down, the choice is pretty stark. Without trust, AI becomes a threat. It becomes a tool for control, for manipulation, for surveillance. But if we do have that trust, then AI could be one of the greatest blessings we've ever created. A tool that could help us solve some of our biggest problems.
Okay, so we've looked at these three big ideas. So now, let's pull it all together. What does this actually look like as a set of rules? A blueprint for the people actually building this stuff? The tech leaders, the policymakers, all of us.
Here we go. 7 rules for ethical AI straight from this ancient wisdom. 1. Treat user data like it's a sacred trust. It's not yours to sell or exploit. 2. Build algorithms people can actually understand. 3. Make sure someone is always accountable. 4. Code fairness in from the very beginning. 5. Share the wealth. Think of it like a zakat for the digital age, a way of giving back to make sure everyone benefits. 6. Public good always comes before profit. And 7. Build trust the old-fashioned way, through honesty, clarity, and a little humility.
Which brings us to our final takeaway. And it's about something bigger than just a checklist. It's about a whole mindset, a different way of thinking about power and technology. It's about governance that's actually inspired by integrity.
What this ancient model really offers us is a template. It's a way of thinking about leadership that shows us how to protect the things we all share, like our data, how to make sure the people in charge are actually held accountable, and how to ensure that the whole point of these powerful new tools is to make society better for everyone.
And this gets to a really important point. Maybe the biggest challenges with AI aren't about the code at all. Maybe they're about us. They're about our own ethics. We're going to need that old-school honesty, real transparency, the courage to do the right thing, the humility to admit we don't have all the answers, and just a deep, unshakable sense of justice.
So we're left with this really powerful idea from the book, AI Governance, inspired by Siddiq Akbar. Now, Siddiq Akbar was a title given to the Caliph, and it means the most truthful. It was all about his rock-solid integrity. And that right there is the ultimate question for our time. The question isn't, can we build these incredible machines? We know we can. The real question is, can we find the truthfulness, the wisdom, and the integrity within ourselves to guide them for the good of everyone?